Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Leisrealtalk. All right, it's Thursday night. Well, Friday morning. Weekend is right around the corner. And summer is almost over. Well, it's been a few weeks since we last talked about the economy. We all know China's economy is struggling, but just how bad is it? Well, it's so bad that even local officials who used to fake the numbers are now telling the truth. Believe it or not, they really are. In the past, local officials often inflated economic data to make GDP look better, mainly to boost their chances of promotion. But now, with the economy struggling and everyone short of money, some provinces and cities don't want to hand over tax revenue to the central government that the money that they didn't actually earn. So instead, they've started reporting their financial numbers more truthfully. And this has created a new problem. A big discrepancy now exists between local financial data and the figures reported by the central government. It's a new phenomenon that reflects a form of soft resistance by local governments. Um, in a nutshell, financial hardship is forcing some officials to tell the truth. So, for example, in the first half of this year, Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen all recorded two consecutive quarters of negative growth, with retail sales of consumer goods falling 4.4% over last year. But nationwide, retail sales supposedly grew 5%. If China's four wealthiest cities are seeing consumption decline, how can the country overall be showing an increase? So this new trend gives us an opportunity to assess China's economy more accurately at the local level. Today, let's take a closer look at the economic data of Shenzhen, which is caught right in the middle of the tariff war. Um, so so in the program description, we're going to take a look at how the tariff war impacted Shenzhen, and then we'll address the central government's solution to that problem, which is not a solution in my opinion. But first things first, let's take a look at Shenzhen's financial data to understand how it's being caught in the tariff war. All right, so according to the city's statistical yearbook, um, Shenzhen's total industrial output was about 4.9 trillion yuan, with exports reaching 2.8 trillion. So if you do the math, that's about 57%. So in other words, exports accounted for 57% of total industrial output of the city. But actually, yeah, this is the statistical yearbook. But there are double counts. There are double counting in the industrial output. For example, semiconductor parts made by one company and then assembled into final products by another are counted twice in the total output. So adjusting for this redundancy, the real share of exports in Shenzhen's economy is closer to 80%. Now, Shenzhen's model, which is typical of China, can be described as what they call two ends abroad. In Chinese, 两头在外, right? Two ends abroad. It relies on both imports and exports. That's what it means. The city imports components or critical raw materials, then produces final goods for foreign markets for export. So in today's hostile trade climate, this model is under tremendous stress. Just to understand how the tariff war is playing out, let's take a look at the detailed numbers. And just keep in mind, Shenzhen is the best observation point to understand the impact on China's exports, because it's a city built on trade and it's highly sensitive to external conditions. So now let's look at Shenzhen's import-export performance in the first half of the year based on official reports. Let me make this bigger. I think you can read better. It's too small. Make this bigger. I think this will be better. Yeah, this is much better. Okay, so this is so total exports was down 7% over last year. It's 1.3 trillion in 25 versus 1.41 last year. I highlighted in yellow. And then private companies, which account for the largest share, saw exports fall from 1 trillion, a little over 1 trillion to 900 billion yuan, a drop of 11.2%. State-owned enterprises reported only a 2% decline. They're the least impacted. And foreign invested companies, including joint ventures, reported a moderate 5% decline. This sharp downturn shows the real impact of the US-China tariff war, and it's hitting the private sector hardest. Claims by China's customs that tariff war has no impact on China's economy are essentially false. So now what's interesting is while exports declined, imports actually increased. If you look at the import section, in the first half of the year, Shenzhen's imports rose to 859 billion yuan, up 8% from last year. And most of the increase came from private and foreign invested companies. I highlighted the imports in green. State-owned enterprises saw a large decline in imports, but since their share is small, it didn't change the overall trend. And this is telling. Even as exports fall, imports keep rising. So does this mean that during the tariff war, Shenzhen's electronics industry, among many others, has no choice but to keep importing parts just to stay in business? As a result, Shenzhen's trade surplus in the first half of the year fell to 450 billion yuan. It's down 27%. It's a stunning 27% drop. And this combines falling export and rising imports, right? So the combination of falling exports and rising imports reflects the true cost of the tariff war. On one hand, you need to keep buying parts and raw materials to stay in business. On the other hand, you have no control over foreign market demand. It's a unique, I should say, it's a unique challenge to China's two ends abroad model, right? Other data supports this picture. In the first half of the year, Shenzhen's cargo throughput dropped 8% over last year, and it matched the 7% decline in exports. And the logic is clear. If exports are shrinking, then freight volumes are falling. When exports are hurt, businesses have to cut back, and that is reflected in the city's fixed asset investment. So let me share that data with you. And this data came from Shenzhen Statistics Bureau. Overall, fixed asset investment fell 2.1% in the first quarter. By June, the year-to-date decline had deepened to almost 11%. This shows a dramatic drop in the second quarter, tied directly to the tariff war. And the Bureau also breaks down investment by category. So the first breakdown is real estate versus non-real estate. Both were already down in Q1, but both collapsed further in Q2. And then it broke down by sector. So you have the primary sector, which includes agriculture, forestry, and fisheries. This is the sector that utilizes the nature or natural resources. It still showed growth. I don't know where the growth came from. I think but anyways, it showed growth, but the pace slowed in the second quarter. It went down from 88% to 62%. And then the secondary sector, which is mostly manufacturing, it's the backbone of Shenzhen's economy. It's manufacturing. It was up 3% in Q1, but plunged by 16% by June. So this is disastrous since manufacturing is Shenzhen's backbone, and it shows that after the tariff war escalated, investment activity collapsed in manufacturing. Many entrepreneurs abandoned project altogether. And the tertiary sector, which is services, such as retail, transport, finance, IT, education, healthcare, entertainment, also declined in the second quarter. And then let's take a look at the breakdown between private and state-owned enterprises. The private investment was consistently down more than 16% in both Q1 and Q2, showing steady erosion of confidence throughout 2025. However, state-owned enterprises showed growth of 5.2% in the first quarter, but by June, it had plunged to 23%. I mean, that's a drop of 23%. And this dramatic shift suggests that the SOEs, initially confident, were hit hard by the tariff war in second quarter and pulled its investments, or a significant share of its investment. In short, the private sector lost confidence from the start of the year, while the tariff war knocked the wind out of the SOEs, the state-owned enterprises, in the second quarter, according to these numbers. Moving on to the breakdown by industry sectors. Among Shenzhen's major industries, wholesale and retail, essentially the consumer sector, was hit the hardest. In the first half of the year, if you look at the green highlighted numbers, investment in this sector fell by 46.1%. And this shows that retailers are pulling out, leaving large numbers of shops vacant with no new tenants in sight. And this confirms with all the social media videos that we've seen across China, particularly in large cities like Shenzhen, Shanghai, and even Beijing. We've seen videos showing large shopping malls closing, the entire streets, showing empty shops or vacancies. I mean, this number confirms the videos that we've seen. And this collapse in investment is directly related or directly reflected in consumption data. And in the first half of the year, Shenzhen's total retail sales of consumer goods reached 497 billion. It's down 2% from 507 billion last year. And so you might wonder, how was it only down by 2%? Because 2% is small. Well, within that category, the restaurant industry was hit worst of all. Revenue in the first half of this year dropped 19.3% compared with last year. I don't have numbers on the slide for this part. This is something not on the chart, so I'm just giving you the numbers. So keep in mind, So now, the overall consumer in the first half of this year in Shenzhen was down 2%. Within that, the restaurant industry was hard hit. It's down by 19%. But here's the scenario that you need to keep in mind. Since 2023, large numbers of Hong Kong residents have been flooding into Shenzhen to shop, eat, and spend, taking advantage of lower mainland prices. And it was said that the daily cross-border traffic between Hong Kong and Shenzhen exceeded 1 million people. And think about it, yet with this massive inflow of consumers from Hong Kong, it was not enough to save Shenzhen's retail and dining sector. Overall consumption still fell by 2%. So to summarize, based on data from Shenzhen's Statistics Bureau, in the first half of this year, exports fell 7%, the trade surplus shrunk 27%, freight volume is down 8%, investment fell 11%, and consumption still declined 2%, despite the influx of shoppers from Hong Kong. Every sector is shrinking. Now, these are official numbers. Again, I mean, these are what I call closer to reality, but they may still be beautified. But at least they're better than the central government numbers. So every area is contracting, and this is the reality of Shenzhen's economy under the tariff war. Remember, Shenzhen is the most dynamic part of China's economy. When it lost its economic engine, you can imagine the rest of the country. Put simply, if you cover up the word Shenzhen on these reports and ask people to guess which region had such bleak economic data, many people might think of a place ravaged by war, like Russia or Ukraine, right? Because you've seen double-digit decline. That's why people say the US-China tariff war may not involve bullets, but the damage it has inflicted on Shenzhen is no less than that of a real war. And this is why local governments are increasingly leaning toward telling the truth and publishing relatively accurate data. I think they're not 100% accurate, but they're relatively accurate. For many local officials today, especially in first and second tier cities, fabricating numbers no longer helps. It doesn't help. It doesn't help them get promoted. It only hurts their cities. Inflated numbers mean higher tax targets from the central government, forcing them to squeeze even more out of the residents and businesses. So these officials now are being very realistic because they live in these cities. Their families and friends live there too. And they feel the downturn firsthand and share the pain of those around them. So as a result, they're becoming less willing to fake the numbers. That brings us to the next question. So how is the central government handling the fiscal stress? Well, the answer is by increasing taxes. There are 5 measures Beijing is implementing. So let me tell you how the CCP is trying to meet its budget shortfall by increasing taxes. The first is consumption tax. Now, consumption tax is China's third largest tax category after VAT and corporate income tax. Last year, total revenue from consumption tax was 1.65 trillion yuan, which is about 1.2% of GDP. And the main targets are cigarettes, alcohol, luxury items, cosmetics, cars, and gasoline. So for years, collection was lax, and the government never captured every yuan that's due. But last July, Beijing announced a major reform. Consumption tax will gradually shift from a central government tax to a local tax, giving the local government more incentive to collect this. And the collection point will move from production to retail, meaning every purchase will now be taxed based on the final retail price. the goal is clear: to squeeze more revenue. So some Chinese think tanks have noted that in Europe, consumption tax equals about 2% of GDP. So they argue that China must reach that level too, totally ignoring that China's different economic structure. So they set the target at 2% GDP, meaning they will raise consumption tax from 1.2% to 2% of GDP. And that would mean that the CCP will be able to collect an additional 1 trillion yuan of tax in this category. Okay. And they're already doing that. So in the first half of this year, they have already started to collect the consumption tax on what is it? Oh, on car sales. They're already collecting that. And so despite consumption declined in the first half of 2025, Beijing's consumption tax revenue rose 1.7%. And then it's believed that in the second half, the increase will likely to be higher. And this growth comes not from stronger consumption, but from harsher enforcement. And the second category is e-commerce taxation. So according to the National Bureau of Statistics, about 32% of China's total retail sales took place online. That's about a third of the sales. But compliance has been very poor. More than 90% of small online merchants never pay any tax at all. And then the smaller sellers, they account for about 40% of online retail. And if you do the math, China's total online sales in 2024 was about 15.5 trillion yuan. So if 40% of that didn't pay tax, that means there's 6 trillion yuan in sales that escaped the tax system. And so the Tax Bureau has launched waves of investigation into this. And then the CCP has developed what is called golden tax system, right? And it has platforms like Taobao and JD.com are required to give authorities full back-end access, so every transaction can be tracked. So the rule now is simple. All merchants must pay 1.5% of sales as tax. And if you do the math, 1.5% over the 6 trillion yuan, that's another 90 billion yuan tax revenue. And this is not optional. Every transaction is visible to the Tax Bureau now. And what's more, their audits are now being backdated for 3 years. So if your shop hasn't been open that long, you must not only pay taxes on current sales, but also for previous 3 years. And that alone adds about another 270 billion yuan in back taxes. So overall, the CCP can collect 360 billion yuan of new tax revenue in a single year. Okay, item number 3 is rental tax. This is getting a lot of discussions on social media right now. Beginning in September 15th, so it's only, 2 weeks away, the new housing rental regulations will take effect, and they require all rental income to be taxed. And this isn't a new tax. Since 2008, rental income has been subject to a mix of business tax, property tax, and personal income tax, collectively known as rental tax. And the rates are simple: 4% of the rent for residential properties and 12% for commercial properties. So in practice, taxes on commercial rentals are usually collected because they involve licenses and registration. But residential rental tax are not collected because renters or tenants don't register their lease with the government. So when you do the math, well, China's housing rental market is huge. The total market in 2024 was about 3.15 trillion, and residential rentals accounted for 74% of that. So if you do the math, that's 2.33 trillion yuan in 2024. At 4%, that would yield another 90 billion yuan annually. And the government is determined to get it. Online, the golden tax system monitors all bank transfers, flagging regular monthly payments as potential rental income. If you consistently get the same amount from somebody else, the government will suspect that it's some form of income, and they will flag it. And offline, neighborhood surveillance workers, known as the grid manager, are conducting door-to-door checks under the pretext of safety inspections to identify renters. So this online-offline coordination is powerful, and the CCP has the tools to find every case. You cannot escape. You will have to pay. And I think it's paid by renters. Yeah, it's paid by renters, but landlords will also have to pay as a form of income. I think the landlord also have to pay. So it sounds like a double tax. But anyways, the item number 4 is VAT reform. That's a gigantic piece of tax revenue for the CCP. It's the country's single largest source of tax. And there will be a new law taking effect on January 1st, 2026. And this law can be summed up in 5 words: collect everything, leave nothing out. Every single transaction, regardless of size or parties, will be captured by the golden tax system, which is the foundation of China's tax enforcement. It's essentially a digital surveillance network for the economy, or for the government, I should say. Every taxable deal will automatically generate an electronic VAT invoice. No application needed. The system will issue and record it by default. And this universal, no exceptions approach is expected to boost VAT revenue by at least 10%. So in 2024, the VAT revenue was 6.67 trillion yuan. And so starting in 2026, which was only 3 months away, the new system will bring in an additional 667 billion yuan in revenue every year. And the last measure is the notorious universal social insurance campaign. I had already covered it before. It's basically saying that everyone employed would have to pay the social insurance tax by both the employer and the employee. So let's take Henan province as an example, because it's one of the most populous province and it's not wealthy. So the threshold for Henan states that the employer pays 898 yuan per month, and the employee pays 387 yuan. The total between the employer and the employee is 1,265 yuan per month. Now, depending on the size of the population Beijing is targeting, it's another 3 trillion yuan tax every year, targeting what I think 250 million workers. And some argue 400 million workers, but I don't think China's population is at the 1.4 billion. I mean, most people assume China's population at 1.4 billion. So I adjust it down to 250 million. So if you do the math, 250 million at average 1,200 65 per person per month, that will generate about 3 trillion yuan for the CCP. So if you add everything up, let me do this. This is my math. If you add up everything, all the the tax revenue that the CCP is trying to collect, the total new tax burden comes to about 5 trillion yuan. To emphasize again, 5 trillion yuan tax in a single year. What does that mean? It means that China's economy will be further drained by 5 trillion yuan because the money will be collected by the government and not circulating in the real economy. So when liquidity is drained from the system, China's economy tips into vulnerability because it's already very vulnerable. And this massive tax will push the Chinese economy into collapse. And one analyst in Hong Kong argues that when 2 trillion yuan is drained from China's economy, it will explode. His threshold is 2 trillion. So now we just did the math. It adds up to 5 trillion yuan in a year. So it seems that Beijing is determined to kill its economy, right? I mean, by levying such heavy tax, I mean, it's basically killing its own economy because there would be nothing left for people to spend on. I mean, the real economy would be drained. I think the CCP doesn't know what to do. It completely is clueless when it comes to what to do with its economy because the communists are never understand how the economy works. So what will happen? Well, we don't know. We should wait and see. But I think the only solution people have is to get rid of this government and embrace a fundamental change, a real political reform, and a complete revamp of its economy. Otherwise, resisting this economic doom is impossible because the numbers, I mean, I'm using very conservative number. Some people estimate that the social insurance tax adds up to 6 trillion, and I'm cutting it in half. So, yeah, so that's the time bomb. That's the tax bomb that Beijing has just detonated or is in the process of detonating. All right, that's all I have for you tonight. It's a lot of numbers. I know for those of you who love numbers, who love qualitative analysis, this must be satisfying. But when we say China's economy is bad, we're just giving qualitative measures. Hopefully, this will give you a quantitative measure. All right, I want to tell you, I released a new video tonight in the Looking Glass channel, and I couldn't wait to release that video because people have asked me, who is that 23-year-old woman who had a $1 million car crash in Sydney, Australia? And there has been so much speculations about who she really is. And I'm very proud of myself for that video because I laid out all the facts for you to decide who she really is. And I think it's amazing. I mean, I just think it's unthinkable how much money people have, and how much power these red princesses still have in places like Sydney, Australia. But anyways, Chris has already provided you with the link in the description, and I'm sure he's going to copy it here. That's all. That's all for my talk. All right, let's see. Okay, super stickers. All right, let's see. I saw some flying by. Let me thank the people. Okay. A lot wise lack. Well, thank you. Thank you. Okay. All right. Here's one. Mike Stewart. Thank you. The CCP has squandered China's rise. Absolutely squandered it. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mike, for the support. Thank you. All right. Let's see. Um, is that it? I think so. I thought I saw one. All right. Let me take some questions. Um, Oh, Drusilla. Well, thank you, Drusilla. Here's a question from Drusilla Lei. Are employees still not being paid? If this is still happening, how can the people pay more money in increased tax? Yeah, there are so many protests breaking out across China um, from people who are owed salaries ranging from month to even a year. So there's so many videos showing that all across China. Of course, when people are not being paid, then they're not paying their social insurance tax at all. But yeah, but these people continue to work, um, even though they have not been paid for a long time. As far as why they still keep going to work, because they probably cannot find a job elsewhere. Yeah. All right, let's see. Here's a from Mike Stewart. If the idea is to expose the problem in order to force a fix, why not just spill the actual beans? What benefits would somewhat accurate information provide? Well, that's a good question. Well, my answer is twofold. One, they don't even have accurate data. I think the data, Chinese data, is compromised from the very beginning, from the source. I mean, who is still doing their job to collect data? So the numbers are cooked. The books are cooked from the very beginning, from the grassroots level up. So if you want to have accurate financial data, I think it's impossible in today's China. So no matter what you do, it's not going to be accurate. And secondly, even if they have somewhat accurate data, they still cannot fully disclose that because it may it may be a political liability for them because they may expose too many trouble, too many internal problems. So they still have to dress it up a little bit, make it look a little better. So yeah, they cannot. The officials are still wary of the political implication if they show the true economic data because it could be deadly. People like us, people all around the world will see what's really happening in China. So they're afraid. So they will still dress it up so that it's not as bad. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's see. Alan Tan. Well, thank you, Alan. I think from Singapore, right? Well, thank you. All right. Let's see. Here's a question for Lei. Michael Allen. Sadly, they want to steal more money from people instead of cut military budget and bribes to African countries. I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, that's the only thing they know. They want to steal more money from the people. Yep. That, okay, Alan Tan. Greeting from Singapore. We are seeing Many wealthy people from the PRC continue to move here. The Red Princess from Sydney that you mentioned, they are here too. They're everywhere, but they're highly Australia, Canada, Singapore. Yeah, their favorite places is actually Australia. Australia is their, I think, number one go-to place. You know why? Because one, it's closer to China. Number two, it's a vast country that they feel like they have the freedom to do what they want. And then their government is, how to say, relaxed. They're not, unlike the American government, unlike yeah, uh, yeah. So I mean, like New Zealand is worse. I mean, New Zealand is heavily infiltrated by the CCP. Yeah, New Zealand, Australia, Canada is the same thing. I mean, the Canadian government is just almost have an open border policy. They're allowing everyone to come in. So those are their favorite destination. And now some middle class Chinese, they love to go to places like Japan, South Korea. But here's the problem. I mean, the world, I think the Trump administration really needs to come up with a strategy to deal with the CCP, because if the economy continues to deteriorate like that, and the Chinese, the wealthy Chinese or the relatively wealthy Chinese are fleeing like flies, they're going everywhere. They're doing whatever they can to get out of China, but they bring problems everywhere. See, these Chinese, when they come to they brought their mindset, their ideology, and their corrupt practices to their destination country, and that's problem. We've already seen a lot of problems. So, but we don't have the resources or the time to correct the problem, and it's also impossible for us to put up a wall to prevent them from coming in, because some of them have families here, so they can come in legally, and a lot of them have money, so they can invest. But no matter how much money they have, that doesn't mean that they're going to do things according to the American way or the Australian way or the Canadian way. They're going to do things the Chinese way, which is problematic. So we need to have programs to really almost coach the Chinese to hold their hands, to help them understand how to behave like a normal human being in a civilized society, because they don't know. You cannot blame them because they don't know what they don't know. I think they're the victims of this system, and there's an expression. They tell me that we're so poor that the only thing we have is money. And that's the expression. That's the problem. So that's what I think reviving traditional Chinese culture is so important. Showing the Chinese people today the real China before the communists, or reconnect them with the Confucius teaching, help them understand traditional values or the Confucian value is so important. Otherwise, we'll end up inheriting all these problems. But it's really not their fault. It's the CCP's fault. So instead of playing defense, I think we need to come up with a good strategy. I'm very tempted to start a YouTube channel in Chinese language to tell Chinese people how to behave. I used to do this for years before the pandemic. And I think there's a need there. The wealthy Chinese send their kids to like Switzerland to attend the top finishing school to learn etiquette, but it's pointless. The essence of etiquette is the two basic principles. One is to respect others, and number two is to follow the rules. There's nothing special about etiquette. You don't need to read a book to understand that. If you know how to respect other people and if you know how to follow rules, you have good manners. But the Chinese lack in both areas. They don't respect others and they don't follow the rules. So no matter how much money their parents send them to Swiss finishing schools to learn manners, deep down, they don't. Even though some of them are holding high positions in the West now, deep down, they still don't. They still think like a Chinese or mainland Chinese. So this is a problem that I foresee. It's coming up everywhere. You see that in Japan, in South Korea, in Canada, in the US, in Australia, everywhere. So we need to have a better solution. All right. Mike Stewart, if the Red Princesses are here, I'm opening up an automotive body shop. You will have to earn their trust. Yeah. Oh, they are here. Did you see that there's a video showing that? I think a few years ago. Was it during the COVID when there were some the wealthy third generations of the Chinese aristocrats? They had a car rally. Like there was they were all like luxury cars, Ferrari. There were all these fancy cars that paraded down. I think it was in Canada. While waving a red Chinese flag, just to show support to China. I think it was during the COVID that they did that. The video is still online. You could find that. So there are a lot of them out there, but which automotive body shop they will go to, I'm not quite sure. Yeah, I think they have in their circle. They go to their designated body shop or car dealers who will take care of them. All right. Okay. All right. Let's see. D Glass, 2008. I heard that Evergrande finally was delisted. Yes, they were. Since property and gold were major sources of investment, with renminbi taking a nosedive, does China have any options for investors? You mean Chinese investors? Not really. The gold prices in China is higher than the gold prices everywhere else. So the Chinese are trying to get the money out of China to invest in other stock markets, but the CCP has put a lid on that, and they're going to tax them for any capital gains that they're going to make. So they don't really have anything that they can invest. Nothing. All right, let's see. Mike Stewart, they're victims. You're 100% correct. The fact is, could have been raised to behave like the Chinese. If it's all you've been shown, it could happen to anyone. Yeah, it is very sad. And also they have mental health issues. I have been noticing, I wrote a script about the mental health of mainland Chinese, but that video I was not happy with the quality of that script and that video. So it was never published. I still owe you a video to talk about the mental health of the Chinese people. It's a serious problem. And lately, I have some very good insight. Yeah, it's very common. It's very common, even for people like myself who have lived here for a long time. I mean, a lot of my friends have been here for decades. I noticed that there's a very high level of anxiety or fear in them that they can't get rid of, and it's hurting them. It's hurting their personal life and professional life seriously. So it's something that I want to talk about. Drusilla, like Trump and Rubio has put a freeze on all visas, and they're looking into foreigners with visas, especially those from China. Also reviewing those foreigners here in our colleges. Good, they should do that. But it's a lot of work. There's so many Chinese all around the world, and it's going to take a lot of resources to go through them all. So there has to be other better solutions. I see the problems. It's impossible to go through every one of them. I mean, it is possible, but you have to spend a lot of time and resources on it. It's all tax revenue, right, that we pay. So Dave M, have a good weekend, Lei. As for me, I'm watching my favorite country, Cambodia, being swallowed whole by China under a new cooperation agreement. See you after the holiday. Oh, yes, it's the Labor Day weekend. Oh, Cambodia. Speaking of which, yeah, it's very sad. There's one country, the Belt and Road project. China is being sued for its Belt and Road project last week. Was it last week? By one of the South American country because of the poor quality of its dam. The dam that the Chinese is building for this country. I don't remember the name of the country. No, it wasn't Chile. Um, sorry, but yeah, but they sued China for the poor quality project, and I think this is only the beginning, and it's a good sign. It's a good sign. All right, thank you. Let's see. All right. Oh, it's Peru. Yes, yes, it is Peru. Peru. Someone asked me, has Wang Huning been sidelined? I hope so. Oh, speaking of Wang Huning, the latest that I heard is he has jumped ship. He has swinged to the reformist faction. That's the latest word. So, all right. Never buy Chinese construction. All right, that I reached the bottom. Chris, have you copied people the link to that video? Okay, pass Z word. Someone asked me a question. Uh, if Japan hadn't invaded China, could we say that Kuomintang would still be running China, making it a better place like Taiwan? It's very possible. I think China, I mean, if Japan hadn't invaded China, then China today would be Taiwan, but many times bigger. Um, yeah, China might have gone through the democratic process that Taiwan did, becoming a democracy. So it's entirely, believable. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. All right. Someone asked me, can you talk about 巨婴? 巨婴, uh, giant infant syndrome. Giant infant syndrome refers to the syndrome where adults behave like an infant. They demand absolute attention. They want to get what they want immediately, and if you don't give them what they want, they throw a temper tantrum and they just burst into a fist of anger or whatever. Yeah. So it's adults behaving like infant, and it's very common in China. Um, it's very common because of the single child policy. A lot of children are spoiled from early age. Yeah, it's also a mental health issue, I think. Drusilla said, "You missed my question." Oh, what? Okay, sorry. Can someone copy that to me? Okay, Drusilla's question. Uh, I think I did. I referred to your question about Trump and Rubio putting a freeze on all the visa. I think that's a good move. I'm saying it's a good move, but it just takes a lot of time and resources to go through the list. Chinese adult diapers. Okay, all right. That's all. That's all for tonight. I thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you this weekend. We should talk about this. I mean, before I end, I want to tell you there's so much rumors about this upcoming military parade, about what's happening between Xi Jinping and Zhang Youxia. I mean, every flavor that you can imagine is out there. So that's what I do not want to talk about it until the dust settles a little bit, because I will be wasting your time hearing all these crazy stories only to find out that they're not true. So, yeah. So if you follow other channels or if you follow China news in language, then you will hear about them. But I think they're just it's another sign of uh, this final dash uh, before the parade next Wednesday. Is it Wednesday? Yeah, next Wednesday. So stay tuned. Maybe I'll talk about that this weekend. There has been interesting development, including the Wang Huning development that somebody just asked me. Yeah, it's words has it that he has jumped ship. All right, that's all for tonight. Thank you. I'll see you over the weekend. Bye. Bye.